Star edge rusher Micah Parsons has yet to sign his extension in Dallas, and if he is available, the Chargers should send a king's ransom to bring him to LA.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers for 10 seasons now, but this is our 8th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, it's the NFL. It's all about the quarterbacks and the guys that get after the quarterback. And right now, one of the best pass rushers in the NFL is disgruntled. And if he is available, the Chargers not only should, but they absolutely must go out there and try to do everything they can to make that move happen and bring Micah Parsons to the Los Angeles Chargers. And we're going to talk about some of the players that have had some decent performances, but maybe are fool's gold. We got to talk about that. And also we got to hear from defensive coordinator Jesse Minter, and he told us about who his 4 starting cornerbacks are and how much he has been very excited about a dominant defensive line.
He's excited. I am also excited, but today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. David, it is a little bit of Chargers mailbag day because we did buy our show earlier in the week, and we're going to be doing a game preview, and the guys on the bubble tomorrow. We wanted to give you guys a chance to get in on today's show, and one thing that we've heard a lot from you guys and wanted to talk about is the potential of the Chargers targeting Micah Parsons. So this is from JG, who says, if we aren't going to spend the money for offensive line help, should we just trade and pay Parsons since Mac has maybe one more year? I think we're a little bit less interested in a trade for Trey Hendrickson, another top pass rusher out there, right, in a different situation. Micah Parsons is in a ballpark of his own. You're talking about a defensive player of the year caliber player who is in the prime of his career, has constantly produced since he's been in the league, and also the cherry on top being that he would be a match made in heaven for a defensive mind like Jesse Minter. And David, we usually scoff at the Chargers potentially sending, extreme resources to go and get one player because it's so rare that one player can kind of put you over the hump and make you instantly Super Bowl contenders. But it's hard not to think that the Chargers, if this keeps going, and we're almost into the season now at this point, if they really decide they could move him, that the Chargers should be all in and trying to get kind of a generational defensive talent.
No question about it, because players like this, they don't become available all the time. And when they do, it's earth-shattering type of moves that can change the trajectory of your franchise. I mean, hey, look at it. The team that is in the same city that you play in made a trade for a edge rusher, and guess what? They ended up with a Super Bowl championship as, a byproduct of one of those moves. They pushed all the chips into the center, and it paid off in a big, big way. And so obviously, when you're talking about a trade of this magnitude, there's not a lot of examples of what this may look like, the framework. However, there is a player obviously on the Chargers that was traded pretty close to in his prime. And of course, I am referring to the future Hall of Famer, Khalil Mack. And this is what it took. At the time, Khalil Mack was 27 years old. Right now, Micah Parsons is 26 years old. And so for what it took for Khalil Mack was 2 first-round picks, a third, and a 6th in exchange for Khalil Mack, a 2nd, and a conditional 5th-round pick. And again, that was at 27 years old. And so it is going to take absolutely a king's ransom. And I think that's probably just the beginning of the conversation when it comes to getting somebody who has had 4 straight seasons of 12-plus sacks. And of course, that's every season he's been in the NFL.
Yeah, and I mean, last year even hit that number while missing 4 games, which is just as impressive. 52.5 sacks in 63 games is super rare, and I do think, something close to that Khalil Mack trade would be what it's going to cost. And it'll be interesting, obviously, because the Khalil Mack situation was a little different. Yes, he, wanted to get paid and all of that, but it didn't seem as, I mean, it feels really bad, at least as far as
a little
in
contentious,
Dallas with Micah Parsons, just as far as like, he's already said his farewell to the Dallas fans, which you don't usually see that as part of it. I mean, Myles Garrett obviously had a similar thing, and we were saying, hey, go trade that for Myles Garrett too if he becomes available. But I think the other thing that would give you more cause to do it would just be the fact that even if you have to pay a guy like that $40 million a season, which is what it's going to cost, obviously those deals a few years down the road don't seem that crazy as the salary cap continues to shoot through the stratosphere, and he doesn't have the injury history that someone like a Joey Bosa had when you made him the highest paid defensive player in NFL history at the time, because this is a guy that before last season had only missed one career game before missing 4 last year. So this is a different type of animal, and I think the ability of Joe Ortiz in this front office to be able to find guys defensively. I mean, Jamari Caldwell looks like another one. RJ Mickens looks like another one. Cam Hart, Tarheeb Still. You could conceivably be able to pay someone like that while being able to fill in the rest of the roster with rookies and keep that churning and be able to still have a competitive defense, even if you're paying one player that much. So I think the heir apparent to Khalil Mack, obviously, and you get a year of them together, Thule would still have a ton of snaps because this is a guy that can move all over the formation. A true chess piece that someone like Jesse Minter would love to have, I'm sure. I think the other thing that's a little, would be more concerning is, okay, well, how long is Jesse Minter going to be here to keep, elevating these guys? So I think they do have, Steve Clinkscale and Mike
Still want
Elston.
that Jesse Minter succession plan, man. I still want it, man.
I mean, I think you have guys like Mike Elston. We can all agree is one of the best position coaches in the league right now.
No
You have
doubt.
Steve Clinkscale, who it's hard to imagine somebody who's done a better job with what they've
That
had
whole
available
defensive
to
staff
them.
is a bunch of rock stars.
Yeah, the defensive staff is, pretty solid. I mean, everywhere you look. I mean, even Navarro Bowman, what he did with the linebackers, Dylan Roney with what he's done with the edge rushers. It's hard to find a weak spot on that side of the football. Offensively, a different story. But let's get to one more Chargers mailbag question here. From Better Skip Over Me. Well, we won't skip over you today. What's the likelihood of a trade happening within the next 2 weeks or so? David, what do you think?
I think right now it's at its highest likelihood that a trade would take place, because right now is that pocket of time where you can kind of put whatever player that you acquire through that crash course to try to get them ready to contribute right away in the regular season. Because once the regular season gets here, it's all about putting all of your time, effort, and energy into specifically game planning to beat that opponent any given week. So you just don't have enough time to be able to get players ready. So if you're going to do it, the time is right now.
Yeah, and we saw the Chargers last year pull off 2 trades in this same time frame after the final cut down day, bringing in Taylor Heinicke because they just knew that Easton Stick was not the guy as the backup quarterback and was basically unusable in that. And then also, which is funny because now Easton Stick's in Atlanta and now Taylor Heinicke is in Los Angeles, obviously. But I would say it's hard to say very likely because I don't know if I'd put it at like an 80% chance or something like that. But I think I'd put it over a 50% chance. I think it's more likely than not that you will see the Chargers make some sort of trade before the start of the regular season. Now, are you sending someone or are you bringing someone in? Because that's a little different of a conversation, David.
It's got to be an acquisition, right? I mean,
that's what's going to get people up. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, of course, there's a couple of areas of surplus, and we'll talk about some of those guys that maybe have some value that you could probably get some from a little bit later on in the show. But I think it has to be trying to improve the team, trying to improve the quality, the depth on the offensive line. I think has to be one of those number one targets that the Chargers have to be looking at trying to address.
And I think at certain positions, you're at the point now where you can't worry about the timeline. You can't worry about how quickly you can get them up to speed. You can only worry about how do we add to this position? How do we add depth here? How do we add someone who could potentially start if it is a disaster? And I'm, looking at the interior of the offensive line when I'm saying that. I think that's exactly where your head has to be at. I think we also expect him to be very Joe Ortiz, that is active on cut down day, right? Active on the waiver wire. That's how Hassan Haskins got on this team last year. But I do think that with Joe Ortiz, it's so great because we saw like one trade in, however many years of Tom Telesco since 2013, 12 years, 11 years, somewhere around that. So
wasn't it like 1 or 2? Yeah,
I know. Yeah, it was literally nothing. But now it's exciting because you have a guy who will wheel and deal, but they do only have 6 picks. I think a player could also be leaving, might be just as likely as them bringing someone in. But who do the Chargers have? We know Taylor Heinicke, but maybe there are a couple other guys that would make sense as well. We're getting into all that and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Mark your calendars. August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champ before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. If you guys want to take a flyer on the MVP race, you can get great odds on Justin Herbert. I'll tell you that right now, or you can crown your champion in August and get good odds before, and if you have a good, hunch of who is going to be great this year. But right now, the Chargers are minus 140 to win over 8.5 games, but you can still get plus money on 9.5. You think they're going 10 wins or more, and I'd put myself right around there right now. You can still get that at plus 115. And after the Slater injury, the Chargers are plus 330 to win the division behind the Chiefs and the Broncos. So visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only on FanDuel. Play your game. David, let's continue this Chargers mailbag before we get into some of the practice notes from today. And I want to start with this one here that's very relevant, I think, especially with all of the trades that are just flying around the NFL right now. I mean, man, I don't know what got in the water. The NFL isn't the MLB, right? Or even the NBA, where you see, even at the deadline, trades fly around. But man,
I love it, man.
Yeah.
Isn't it making it so much more interesting?
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, I think that you always, root for more trades to happen, more movement, guys changing teams. I mean, the Broncos just traded, arguably their second or third best receiver to the Saints on Wednesday as we're recording this. So I think that you want to see it. And I think that the one thing you have to remember, too, is it's not always you getting a player. It's sometimes you trading a player away. And I think that's
true.
Where this comes in from Ed Heinicke, who says, which on the bubble players have enough trade value to be moved from now until the final cut down? So I'd start by saying it's probably unlikely that you're going to be able to trade an undrafted free agent who everyone just passed up on, right, to another team. It seems unlikely, but it doesn't mean that there aren't guys that should be traded, including Taylor Heinicke, who we advocated for yesterday on the show, who again didn't practice in team drills. Daniel Popper mentioned on Hops with Pop, he did get hurt in the game, right, and that could be part of it, but also practiced in team drills earlier this week. So still feels like there's something going on there that we don't know about. I think it'll be a bigger red flag if we find out that he was healthy and doesn't play in this final preseason game the Chargers have this weekend against the 49ers. So I'd say Taylor Heinicke, just because it's like, okay, you don't really need him for depth. If Justin Herbert and Trey Lance both go down, tank your season and get as good of a draft pick as you possibly can at that point, because your chances are done either way. I'd say he is one. Who is another one maybe you'd put on this as far as, hey, guy on the roster bubble, maybe instead of trying to get him on the practice squad, they try to get some picks back or a pick back for them?
Yeah, so I think for the Chargers right now, as crazy and funny as this sounds, I think they have a surplus on their defensive line. And I think that there's an area there where they could look to move somebody. And right now, I'm looking at Otito Ogbonnia as a potential guy that they could maybe look at trying to ship out. I mean, hey, everybody and their mom across the league is always looking for quality defensive linemen to add to the rotation, because that's a position of attrition. They play obviously a violent position and in a very violent game, but one of the more violent. So whenever you got somebody that can play adequately, I think that you have to consider that. And I think Otito Ogbonnia might be a guy they might be able to get some kind of value for.
That's a very interesting one, just because obviously you saw Harrison Phillips get traded on Wednesday. Like, defensive tackles are always going to be in vogue and always going to be wanted. And if you have a guy that you can get anything out of, you do it. It would be interesting to kind of get a gauge on how the rest of the league feels about Tito Ogbonnia, right, through his first few seasons in Los Angeles. So I'm going to throw a name out here that I don't think will get moved. And he's not necessarily on the bubble, but maybe other guys catching up changes the picture. I think if you're talking about this specific situation, it's probably not a one-year deal you just gave out to a free agent and the guys that really weren't coveted in free agency. But usually in contract years, I think would be part of it. Lohi Gilman. That's a guy that I would say, I don't think he's on their radar or something that would happen. But I'd say if you're trying to get some legitimate value back from someone and you feel like you have a surplus at the position and then you could weather that, he would be a guy that would be on the radar. The one guy I'll say is not on the radar is Quentin Johnston. First of all, I don't know what you would even get back for him at this point, but for those hoping that Quentin Johnston is going to get traded, I don't see that happening by any means, even with the success of the younger guys. And also, you have Trey Harris, who left practice on Wednesday. Something to monitor there. Quentin Johnston should be back by the start of the regular season. We don't know anything about Trey Harris. We didn't hear that he got carted off the field or anything. We just heard that he was in individuals, according to Daniel Popper, and then ended up walking into the locker room. So nothing to get too spooked about, I would say, right now, but not in team drills. And you already have Quentin Johnston out, so I don't see any movement at that position. But this is an interesting one we have here, David, from John Clark, who's asking a little bit of a different question, a little bit of a positivity question to a certain extent. We all like to embrace the positive performances of the players fighting for their roster spots in the preseason, but out of this year's top preseason performers, whose showing has been fool's gold and whose is for real. So we've talked about a lot of the guys who, we like and kind of believe in the performances we've seen so far. So I want to stick to the fool's gold part of this, David. Who is a player you think, maybe has some hype around them right now, maybe has been able to perform well in preseason games, but probably isn't going to, maybe isn't all for real just based on the small sample size we've seen?
Yeah, I think a player to me that comes to mind that fits that mold is a guy who has made a couple of plays that has, it's been something that, he's been able to kind of make a small name for himself, even though he's a very large human being. I'm talking about wide receiver Dalvin Campbell. 4 receptions for 74 yards. To me, though, he is a go ball extraordinaire type receiver, and I don't know if there's any more tricks to the bag to me. So I think, and it's hard for me to be critical because the fan in me, but I do feel like maybe there's some elements to his game that might have been fool's gold.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the guys you brought up in the last trade part was a guy that I had in this segment, and that's Otito Ogbonnia. And to me, it's kind of in the Justin Jones category. He hasn't had this much hype going into every season, but it's one of those things where it's like, how many years can you wait for the breakout of Otito Ogbonnia? And I think Daniel Palmer made a good point when talking about him, because he did also have the same injury that Rashawn Slater had, and a patellar tendon, and was able to come back and played, all of last year and has played a ton of snaps. But it maybe looks better because he's, recovered more from that. I would agree with that, but it's just, for me, with the competition in that defensive line room, we're going to talk about how good that room is. I don't know if he's going to be a guy who just stands out and becomes, the guy, the Poona Ford of this year's season, or the huge breakout player. I'd say another guy, Eric Rodgers, just because it's like the small sample size we saw from him was so ridiculous that it's almost impossible to think that an undrafted free agent is, going to make the team and also, have 0 catches on 6 targets with 2 interceptions and a pass breakup. I hope that they find a way to kind of finagle things to be able to put him on IR, keep him on, in some way to potentially push that can down the road, and then waive him maybe in the middle of the season when everyone's kind of already made their big moves and done most of their roster construction and aren't having to cut an active player in the middle of the season. So I hope they can find a way to keep him around, just because I think he showed a lot of promise. Probably not going to be a 2 interceptions kind of guy like that in every game. But obviously super impressive. Last one, Luke Grimm, undrafted free agent, took a punt back to the house. Should have probably had another one versus the Saints, David. And I honestly, I apologize because I don't remember who posted this, but I literally saw him compared to Wes Welker and saying, the Chargers let Wes Welker get away, and this could be the next Wes Welker. When he looks good as a punt returner, we haven't seen anything as far as like him as an actual receiver. He missed most of camp so far, and I don't think that you can play that game just because it's like, for every Wes Welker, there's a Michael Bandy. And so it's like, I like Luke Grimm. I hope they can stash him on the practice squad, but I'm not just going to, be so scared about it that I let it affect my big-time roster decisions.
No, I think that's a great call out. I mean, I think he was brought in here to kind of be Ladd McConkey light, and, he hasn't really produced anywhere close to the level of a Ladd McConkey on the offensive side. Hey, anytime you can provide a spark on special teams, you're going to get some run, you're going to get some notoriety from that. But yeah, as a full kind of complete football player and his impact, I don't think it's really been all there.
And we've fallen for the small white slot receiver, in preseason before. And that is something that has always kind of stood out. But there's always a Griff Whalen out there as well. And that's from like the deepest of cuts for those who have been with us, almost a decade. But that's the thing. I like Luke Grimm. I hope Tito Ogbonnia can take that next step. I hope they can stash Eric Rodgers. But if you're talking about fool's gold, and just like if you had to pick someone who might be fool's gold, those are the guys that I see. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that, isn't as shiny in person as it's looked so far in very limited preseason action. But we still have more to get into because Jesse Minter gave us some really good insight on the cornerback room, saying they have 4 starting corners. Also talked about his interior defensive line and Daniel Popper also put out a great article about how that was a huge question mark going into it, and it looks like it might be the deepest position on the team. So we're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's their 401k, properties, or investments, and when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there is Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does all the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, and get smart categorization of your spending. And finally, feel in control of your money without ever having to touch a spreadsheet. One of the things I haven't talked about with Monarch Money often, but one of the biggest things that stood out was me realizing how many subscriptions that I pay for, and also how many subscriptions I pay for my wife as well. And seeing all of that in total was really great to get the full picture on. And we realized just how much that stuff we hadn't used in so long and are saving money every month on that now. So don't let that financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off of your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. David, it's time to get into what we heard from practice and some of the things that came out in a shorter practice, which is why we're talking about it now, but also 2 very important position groups for the Chargers, their cornerbacks and their interior defensive line, both of which have really giant question marks surrounding them. There's really no way around that part of it. But I do want to thank everyone for making us your first listen. If you need a second listen, make sure to check out Locked On Fantasy Football with hosts Vinny Iyer and Michelle Madjuk, so you can dominate your fantasy league. I know I have a work league that I absolutely need to dominate because I see those people all the time, and I'm going to be using Locked On Fantasy Football on YouTube and wherever I get my podcast from, so I make sure that I'm up to date on all of the latest. But let's get to this, David, because I thought one of the most interesting things that Jesse Minter said at his press conference on Wednesday was that the Chargers had 4 starting corners, right? And obviously, you can only have 3 on the field, right? And to me, it just kind of gave the vibe of like, if you have 4 starting corners, do you have 1, right? Like there's always the old adage, you have a college football team that has 2 quarterbacks going into the season, we're going to play both of them. And that almost never actually works out, right? And it just feels like at this point in the offseason, you would hope that someone has separated themselves, that there was, maybe a tier above, whether it's, Tariq Still and Dante Jackson kind of being the top 2, but other guys can kind of rotate in. But it feels like even though there might be some separation, there's not like a total consensus of guys who have just run away with those starting spots.
Yeah, and that's something that Jesse Minter had said. He's like, I hoped at one point that one of these guys would separate themselves and kind of stake claim to being the number 1 guy. And at least up to this point, that hasn't happened. But I think we can read a little bit through the lines and also just interpret what we've seen throughout the offseason about who has been performing at a high level and who has been a little bit more inconsistent. I think the one guy we know that's been performing at a high level pretty much throughout is Tariq Still. It seemed like he took it very seriously in the offseason. He trained, worked his butt off, and made sure that he was in position to really take off in his second season. I think he has all the ability to do that. I think also Dante Jackson's been making a ton of plays throughout practice, been, getting a ton of interceptions. We know his calling card is being able to have success out in those zones, being able to be very comfortable out there and letting those ball skills take over as a guy who had 5 picks last year. So if he can bring that to the table here for the Chargers, then I think you got to be very excited. I think it's just one of the ugly duckling of the group here is probably Benjamin St. Juste. I think it's just the guy that has not been as consistent as some of the other guys. And, that also goes for Cam Hart. But the consistency part for him is just with the health and the ability to stay on the field.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have questions about this group, right? I mean, Dante Jackson, for all of the things he should be better at in the Chargers defense, was still a liability in a lot of ways last year for that Steelers defense that also had a lot of really good players. So he did have 5 picks. You don't luck into 5 picks. I will say that for sure. But it was a lot of risk and reward with Dante Jackson. And I think you were hoping that that would kind of smooth itself out. And I think to a certain extent it has. And I do think there is some of this that is a little bit tongue in cheek, because I do feel like if you're talking about Derwin James playing in the slot and who the 2 outside cornerbacks will be with him, it's going to be Tarheeb Still and Dante Jackson when things, when the dust settles. And Cam Hart, what I just hope is that, he can continue that upward trajectory with the amount of time that he's had to miss. But Benjamin St-Juste, like, by saying the 4 starting cornerbacks thing, it just feels like he's just trying not to tear any of his guys down.
Yeah.
Because those are all, 4 veterans at this point. But he also did mention Nico Reed, who, we'll have a conversation about tomorrow. And someone that I really do believe, in my opinion, still has a chance to potentially overtake someone like a Jasir Taylor on the active roster. But I do want to talk about this defensive line, David, because Daniel Popper did put out a great article with a focus on the defensive line and basically just talked about how it went from being a huge question mark, just like it was last year, to being potentially the deepest position on this football team. And I think he's right, because we don't know who the Poona Ford is of this group, so to speak. But we do know that all of these guys have had their moments in the preseason and this entire offseason, and it's a group that I can legitimately be excited about.
Absolutely. And, and Jesse Minter was also very excited about it as well. When asked about it, he said, really encouraged, kind of what we hoped, in the sense that you're going to maybe be deeper, maybe have more guys, and then guys that maybe weren't in roles last year, the improvement that they've made. And he also is talking specifically about Justin Eboigbe. He said he's taken a huge step, and we know that he put on some good weight to be able to put himself in position to be on the football field more and to be able to get in there and get into that rotation. And yeah, but this was another year before the season started. Like last year, we had a little bit of questions about how they were going to be able to replace the guys that were lost on the defensive line, like the Poona Fords and the Morgan Foxes. But it seems like, the moves that they've been able to make, they are already bearing fruit, and looks like it's going to be another really good defensive line room.
It really feels like that, man. And like the other part of this that kind of goes unspoken when we have a lot of these conversations or doesn't get brought up enough is just our ultimate faith in Mike Elston and how good of a coach that dude is. Because that, we're talking about all of these guys performing, even the guys that aren't going to make the team. But with this kind of competition and this kind of skill level, what happens is tough decisions have to be made.
Yeah.
And that is kind of what I'm watching for in this group now, because if you look at it, I mean, let's go through it. Tier Tart, Deshaun Hand, Naquan Jones, Tito Ogbonnia, Justin Eboigbe, Jamari Caldwell. That's 6 guys right there.
Yeah.
We know that Scott Matlock, and they're putting him out there in front of you at the press conference. Scott Matlock, in my mind, his spot is safe. He
ain't going nowhere.
Yeah, and I mean, it's worth mentioning, David, also that, he was at the podium and said that his focus was going to be mostly on offense, which is a, kind of 180 from what we heard from him. We knew it, but I don't know if he knew it. Because, I mean, the last time we heard from him, he was saying how he wanted to be an
all-pro defensive lineman,
a Pro Bowl defensive lineman. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, which at this point, man, like, he probably is better off focusing only on the fullback thing. If he's going to be your full-time fullback, I don't think it can be, something where Justin Herbert's screaming at him, to motion over. Like, and that was like him put in a really tough spot last year, and I don't want to seem like I'm holding that against him. But if he can give you something on the defensive line and also serve a role in that whatever black jersey he's wearing out there, because he's the only guy that's, playing both ways, the Travis Hunter without the nice PR obviously. I think... And obviously another part of that big, giant special teams contributor too. So I think his spot is safe, but tough decisions are going to be made because they're going to keep all 6 of those guys and also have Scott Matlock as a 7th defensive lineman when we know you have to keep 5 safeties, when it doesn't feel like Kyle Kennard's ready for the big time yet, and you're going to have to keep a Caleb Murphy or a Trayvon Morris-Brash. That's where it gets tough. But I did think that Jesse Minter, maybe the part that kind of gave the biggest vote of confidence to this unit, is just when asked about how many guys would realistically play on game day with all of the guys we've talked about and how deep they are in that room, he said basically everyone who has a helmet is going to be playing, which shows you, how good he feels about these guys. And I believe him. You know what I mean? Like, I truly do believe him. And I do believe there's also going to be someone in this room that really shows out. But, man, the guy I'm most excited about is Jamar Caldwell, dude.
Yeah,
I'm just so excited about it. It looks like a hit from them. He's been impressive in every single preseason game, and I just don't know if you can fake even against second
Love his
teamers what
attitude,
he's
too,
been
man.
able to do. The effort,
He's like,
attitude,
hey, whatever
and
you tell me
production.
what to do, I'm doing it. I'm ready to go. Let's get it. Love that.
Totally. And he said, hey, when asked about, standing up to double teams, like, kind of like rolled his eyes like, yeah, I've been doing that a while. Look at me. You know what I mean? And I think that's in part because, like, what his role was asked, the role that was asked for him last year, which was, I think, eat a bunch of double teams, free up Derek Harmon in one-on-one situations when you can, and he'll kind of clean up with the pass rush, and you kind of be our run stuffer, which is why you get 0 sacks in a season after already having a 5-sack season the year before in Houston. So I think he's the ultimate team guy. I see it in his effort. I see it just in his play, but more than that, the dude just got game. Like, I mean, he has ragdolled some dudes shedding blocks. And like, how many times have me and you gone back and forth, like, you got to shed blocks. You got to be able to hold the point of attack and shed a block and get off and make a tackle. How many times have we begged for that from this defensive line?
A lot.
This dude looks like a starter already.
Yeah.
If you told me right now we're going to think of Jamari Caldwell as the best defensive lineman in that room at the end of the 2025 season, I don't know if I'd go as far as predicting it, but to your point, I don't think I'd be surprised. And man, like, me and you, we've been looking for this defensive tackle for a while.
A long time.
And just another thing, going back to the Micah Parsons thing, going back to all the conversations we're having on the defensive side, where it's just like, man, you feel like they can get these guys between this front office and this like defensive group. Obviously, if they're the 25th ranked defense at the end of the year, we're going to feel differently about it. But it feels like they're very much in sync about what they need and being able to maximize the talent they have, identifying the talent, developing the talent, maximizing the talent. It feels like that is all in sync on this defensive line and the defense, or in the defensive side, but the defensive line is a great representation of that. But one more preseason game left, and that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. To make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe and follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, because we're going to be getting into the roster danger that some guys are in. Guys like Nico Reed's last chance to find his way on the roster. Caleb Murphy, another one. Jasir Taylor, how much is he going to play in this game? Who is going to play on this game will also tell us a lot as well. Maybe even some guys who have done enough at this point and don't need to prove it in the final preseason game, because obviously the Chargers had one extra. I can't wait to get to that show tomorrow. I'm very excited for this final preseason game. And it feels like most people malign, or really get upset with the preseason. I feel like it's been a fun preseason. The Chargers have a lot to play for and a lot of guys fighting for something. So to make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free. Like I said, on Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, listen wherever you get your podcast from, but also find the show every day on all of our social media, at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page, or call into the voicemail line at 323-524-7924 to get your 30-second Chargers buy or sell or fan mail question in. But back to you guys tomorrow talking about the guys on the bubble with one more chance. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bulls.